in my opinion, and I think you articulate the same here, is all verticals of critical infrastructure, right? I mean, if you don't have that cyber-informed engineering from the very beginning, it's not something in mind, then that is a potential risk, not just from a cybersecurity standpoint, but from a safety standpoint, from an economic standpoint, and an overall trust standpoint.
You're listening to Protect It All, where Aaron Crow expands the conversation beyond just OT, delving into the interconnected worlds of IT and OT cybersecurity. Get ready for essential strategies and insights. Here's your host, Aaron Crow.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Protect It All podcast. This one has been we've been working on this forever. My friend Kam is with me today. We've rescheduled this. I literally was trying to record this as I was sitting in my car driving to a client site in a Buc-ee's parking lot, which if you've never been to Texas and seen Buc-ee's, that's a huge place. So, Kam, thank you for being flexible. One time you were in another country, another time zone, and I think we've rescheduled this 7 or 8 times, but that's okay. So I appreciate you being here and being flexible with me, and I'm excited to dig in, man.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is number 7 or number 8 of our failed attempts. And at one point I remember messaging you and I was like, dude, I'm so sorry. I'll send you a gift basket, whatever it takes. So I'm just excited to actually hop on here. And I've been seeing the amazing things that you've been doing in the podcast. And I was really excited when you reached out.
Awesome. Thanks, man. So just tell us who you are. Obviously you're wearing your Armis shirt. So tell everybody who Armis is, what are you doing, and kind of a little bit about your history and your background and kind of what got you to where you're sitting today.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Kam Chumley-Soltani. I might have the longest last name in the entire world. Most people just call me Kam Chumley, director of OT security here at Armis. And I cover all the public sectors, so federal and SLED. Anything from vulnerability management, threat detection, observability, you name it, we've probably touched it in some capacity. And then for us, Armis specifically, we cover anything OT or IoT, medical IoT or IT, and we can do anything from live telemetry, bidirectional integrations. We meet the customer wherever they're at. We're growing at a pretty crazy rate. It has been insanely busy. I've actually only been in Armis for about 6 months now, and it feels like 19 years, which I think is a good problem to have. So much growth. And then before this, I was at Cisco, where I led the public sector for OT sales engineering. And then before that, I was at Dragos. And then before that, a military guy for 8 years. So love the community and giving back, which is why I'm even more excited to be on the show today, talking to you, who I consider a godsend too.
Well, yeah, so let's dive in. So there's so much in this OT space. There's so much coming back out now. We see it in the limelight. We see it in, obviously we see it in our circles in OT, and we're seeing it more in the news. We're seeing more attacks in these OT spaces. Are you seeing more and more folks that are, from clients and customers, the folks that you're talking to worldwide, that are really seeing the value and needing more visibility, more controls, more, understanding of what's going on in their OT spaces? And the caveat to that is the why. Are most of them because they've been directly impacted, or is it because they've seen something in the news, or their competitor got hit, or, they heard about their brother, sister, cousin's uncle that got impacted?
Right.
What's causing the yes or no in that scenario?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Maybe we'll take in reverse order. So, I mean, just in the last couple of weeks, you think about things to release like the new NERC SIP requirements, doing interperimeter boundaries and visibility and monitoring. And then you look at the maritime transportation system, regulations that just got pushed up by Coast Guard. I mean, it's crazy. It seems like every time you turn the news on, it's either something, unfortunately, where there was an attack or a breach, or it's regulation, which, again, it has teeth, which may be necessary at times. But I think OT is starting to get the visibility that it needs. And to answer your question about what I've been seeing particularly is, of course, federal government, tons of compliance and jumping through hoops, not just from a software, but a hardware standpoint, but even on the state and local side. So conversations with lots of CISOs and CIOs and even governor's office about, hey, we recognize that this is an issue. How can we get full-scale observability? How can we get threat detection, vulnerability management, and not just even in traditional OT systems like water and electric utilities, but even things like the airports, the rails, the connected roadways, and merging that together with their critical IT infrastructure. So it's so weird. I think where you and I used to go to conferences and only talk OT, it's actually really refreshing now to see the convergence where you go to conferences and meetings, and now you're actually in the same room as some of the IT folks, which never would have happened before in a million years. So,
or if you were in the same room, they were throwing things at each other, and
I had to bring a couple of monster rehabs and like some dinner tickets just to kind of
Exactly.
level out the
Exactly.
field. So,
I've been in this for a long time. And to your point, like everybody hates the word OT, IT, OT convergence. But ultimately, and I say this all the time, but we're one team. Like we're literally wearing the same jersey. We are one and the same. And we have to be helping each other. And to your point, like that's what I love hearing. I've seen it as well. It's still slow, but getting everybody in the same room is the first step. And that, in my opinion, is the most important step. And it's not, there's tons of technologies, there's tons of solutions, there's tons of consultant agencies, there's all of the things, but it's people, process, and technology. Only one of those things are technology, and solving the technology solution. There's a lot of solutions out there that do great jobs, right? Armis is one of them that does an amazing job, but you still have to do the people and process side. And that's where you need both of those things together. Even if you have the analogy I always give, you can have the best tool in the world. I can buy the most expensive woodworking equipment in the world and have it in my garage and buy all the lumber and sit it right next to it. And I can shut my garage door and come in the next morning and it's still going to be sitting there because nobody actually built anything with it, right? Somebody has to take it and have a process, have a plan, and actually execute using those great tools so that you get the ROI, you get the value, you get the protection from them. The tool's not going to do it by itself.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know why, Aaron, but I just get the vibe that you're a great carpenter. I don't know if you actually do woodworking, but you give me that impression. I couldn't agree more. I mean, last week they had a zero trust OT workshop up at Johns Hopkins, and it was actually, I really liked it because beyond just the presentations itself, highlighting the point you just mentioned, they had workshops where we actually broke out into subgroups. And we looked at the OT Zero Trust fan chart, and it was devices and applications and users. And I remember sitting there in this room with people from all walk. Again, DoD customers and organizations, other vendors, consultant firms. And at the end of this fan chart that we had assigned to us for devices and technology, we literally were just like, there's technology for all of this. Like, yes, 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 yes. But the actual education piece, the people and processes, a whole nother ballgame. And I'd love to hear from your perspective too, like what you've been seeing from a consulting standpoint about bringing people in and the demand for that, because I've been seeing a lot more appetite for even initial assessments, whether it's having somebody go through and running through a survey or making sure compliance and frameworks are aligned, or even things like flyweight kit assessments have been insanely popular. So we'd love to hear from your experience. I know.
Yeah, so agree. Like we're seeing a lot more. In the past, a lot of places would just, hey, I'm going to reach out to the OEM vendor, right? So I have this prime vendor that does, X, Y, and Z, but they're seeing more and more. Not that that's not a good thing. You should absolutely work with those prime vendors. It's not at all to throw shade at them or throw them under the bus, but it's just like, there's a reason why. So I came from EY, right? There's a reason why you have an audit firm that look at your books, right? You have an accountant, you have a CPA, CFO, all of those things, but you still have a third party come in and look at your books to make sure there aren't anything missed. It's not always finding malicious things. Many times it's finding errors and mistakes, misunderstandings, right? All of those are things that it finds too. And that's the thing, that having that outside eye that comes in and look, like how many times have you brought in somebody on, I've been doing this a long time. I remember way back in the day when I was starting out, banging my head against the wall on something and somebody else coming in and be like, have you tried this? And it's the simplest, stupidest thing. And it's like, oh my God, why did I not think about that? I've been banging my head against the wall for 10 hours and I never thought about, did you turn it off and on again? Right? Something simple.
Right. And that one moment you sit there for 5 seconds and it feels like
exactly
years as it all.
So that's what we're really seeing is this is not to replace. You should absolutely have those relationships, but this is a, how do I make sure? And to your point, I see more and more of an appetite of almost in the past 10 years where people were just like, yeah, I think we're good, right? Almost to, put my head in the sand, close my eyes. Like they tell me it's good, I'm just going to take their word for it. To now they're like, that's not good enough. They're telling me they're good. It's more of a trust but verify. It's fine that you tell me that you're good and I believe you and I know you're really good at your job, but I also want a second opinion. Like I got a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. I love you, doctor, but I'm going to go see another doctor to see if there's any other options.
Yeah, maybe 3 other doctors just to check it. Yeah. And it's a good thing, right? I think the community is making steps in the right direction, whether it's, one of the big 4 or it's a small boutique firm. And to the point that you talked about earlier, right? We talk about this a lot, but not necessarily the value of unpeeling the onion or peeling it back, of getting everybody in the same room. And not only from a policy standpoint and doing tabletop exercises and encouraging them to put that in their cybersecurity plan at a maybe semi-annual basis, but even just having a whiteboarding session, man, and going through. And I think some of my favorite moments in my career is walking in with a ton of Krispy Kreme donuts. By the way, I'm not endorsed by Krispy Kreme's donut out there donuts. Yeah, right. Catch me at Krispy Kreme. So, and you go out there and you're writing everything on the whiteboard, and then there's an aha moment where you ask, how is this connected or how is this doing that? And everybody just blank stares. They look at each other, and that moment itself, you succeeded. And it feels amazing. And it just seems like, to your point, more and more of that is happening, which is such a great thing. And I'm just trying to understand, like, if I could have a crystal ball, I've been trying to shake it up to see in the ball to see what's going on in the next 5 years. Where are we going to be at with the amount of regulation that's coming down, the appetite, unfortunately, the increase in activity? If you were to look down the line, what do you think it's going to look like as a community and infrastructure?
If we look, you mentioned regulation, and I think to your point, I'm for and against, too much regulation, because I think regulation
it's just got to be just
does. But I mean, if you really take a 10,000 foot view and you look down on all the critical infrastructures in our country and you look which one's the most mature, power utility and oil and gas. And they're for two different reasons. Power utility, because there's NERC and they've kind of been forced down that road. Oil and gas just has a lot more money, right? So they have the budget and they are more, I can do this and it helps with my availability. They've done a really good job at tying the systems to their ROI and their uptime, right? So we do it the same way in power utility as well. But because of that NERC, that's one of the reasons why we're more advanced. You look at wastewater, water utilities, things, they don't have budget and there is really no regulation. So it's hard for them. They don't have the money. They can't get a rate case increase. There's no capital money to do the things. It's not that they don't want to. It's that how can they if they don't have the budget, right? So the crystal ball is, I think we have to have regulation tied to funding, right? We have to have some opportunities for these smaller entities, especially critical infrastructures, to say, I know I probably have gaps. I don't have any funding to fix these things. I'd love to fix them. Help me, right? And there's organizations like mine that can help. I know, many organizations like yours have special pricing and special offers for those types of entities, and that's what it's going to take. And ultimately, I think this is a global problem. This is not, I talk to people all around the world, as you can imagine, and so do you. It's the same problem in Europe and Africa and Asia and all over. They're having these similar problems. Some of them are different, but obviously China doesn't necessarily have this problem because the government pays for those things. But in places like ours where, they're individual companies, power utilities, most power plants are owned by companies. They're not owned by the government. They're not funded by your tax dollars. You're paying an electric bill, and that's what's paying for. That's the other funny thing is people don't understand that process of, I'm buying my power from this company, but that's not who actually generates the electricity. That's just who.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a whole nother conversation.
And it's a private company.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally backwards. Yeah, and as you've been talking about that too, it's like, do the differentiation between public and private sector, totally different as well. They're taking a large electric utility out there that, again, they're providing power to tons of end consumers at the very end, versus you look at state and local, breaking up by state and county, and much smaller. Some of them aren't even governed by NERCs if they're so small with their power generation. And as you were talking about this, I was actually thinking to myself how difficult it is to actually create regulation for everybody. And I'm thinking of like these very small state and local electric utilities or water utilities that they don't have the resources and they don't have the manning and they don't have the money either. So then it goes back to, let's just say hypothetically that every single one of them found a pot of gold and they could operate independently and they could have upgraded infrastructure and they could have a more secure or more postured cybersecurity stance. In the end, there still needs to be coordination. So then it almost comes down to, if we could, have a magic wand for what regulation would look like, is the regulation or is that wand giving us the ability to give that pot of gold to every state and county owned critical infrastructure component? Or is it better to have a statewide visibility, observability, SOC that ties everything together, both IT and OT? My gears just kind of spinning here.
Well, you see some states doing that very thing, right? So you see state of Florida is doing Cyber Florida. Texas just signed a bill to do, something similar as well.
Yeah, let's go.
Exactly. And that's tied to the Texas Guard. So there is some regulation around those things and some tying. And then this isn't even to mention, and I'm taking this a tangent. It's not exactly the question you asked, but the other thing that's really coming and that's going to push this further and make us need to solve this problem even faster is the AI push, right? So all these data centers are getting spun up. And, I think I saw a number, I just saw a podcast about it the other day, but, we're increasing the generation or the capacity in the state of Texas in ERCOT by 50% by 2030. That's
Yeah, all the viewers should also know that both Aaron and I are
That's right.
Texans to call that out. So it's in our hearts.
So what does that mean? That means that we are increasing the generation capacity in our state in 5 years, right? So that 1.5 times of what we have now. And the weird thing is we're still shutting plants down because they're getting older, they're legacy fossil fuel sites, and there isn't a way to do this with renewables, which means one of two things. The prime use is that it's going to be gas, combustion turbine gas, and the other conversation that people are having is spinning up nuclear. Whichever one is in Pennsylvania. It's not Chernobyl, that's Russia. It's 3 Mile Island.
Which the nuclear conversation is a whole nother thing too, because then you have to get through all of those conversations if people believe that it's safe or not. And I know there's a lot of research out there, but it's an option.
It is. And they're doing it, right? There's all sorts of new, technology that's coming out where they're actually doing like skiff size, about the size of a container that is a controlled nuclear reactor on a skiff. And it's like, you can put up to 100 of them together to be like a gigawatt of power. But all of these are ways we've got to solve this solution. It's, I read a book a long time ago, right? And I've read it multiple times, like what got you here won't get you there, right? We've got to do things different if we want to get past this solution. Our power demand is going to increase, which is tied to it's tied to our economy. It's tied to everything. And that going to the Idaho National Labs, cyber informed engineering, we've got to include cyber in that conversation. Like you said 10 minutes ago, we've got to have it be part of that conversation when we're designing these systems. We have to solve these power problems. We have to solve this AI thing. We have to solve all of these issues. And also we have to do it safely, securely, and make it, instead of trying to bolt on cyber 3 years down the road when it's going to be more expensive, it's going to be hard to change. And it's just, it has to be done now. It really just has to be.
From the very beginning. I mean, even looking at we'll take an example of building compounds for facility control systems on DoD sites, right? Yeah. With the regulation of having that visibility and monitoring requirement as you build them up, that same sort of philosophy and methodology should be applied to, in my opinion, and I think you articulate the same here, is all verticals of critical infrastructure, right? I mean, if you don't have that cyber-informed engineering from the very beginning, it's not something in mind, then that is a potential risk, not just from a cybersecurity standpoint, but from a safety standpoint, from an economic standpoint, and an overall trust standpoint. I will say it is a bit refreshing, though, now, refreshing and also a bit scary that we're hearing more and more about it, right? Like that issue, people are talking more about electric utilities in Texas, and I think across the country as a whole. Every time you turn the TV on, there's something about it. And, to give you an example, I'm speaking tomorrow at the Texas Digital Government Summit in Austin. The panel that I'm speaking on is for critical IT systems. And when I look through, this is some amazing people that are going to be there that definitely humbling to be around. When I looked through all the speaker presentations in the panel, there wasn't a single thing about OT, which is really interesting. And so we all convened and they'd asked, well, what questions, from the audience should we be expecting? What are some questions that maybe that you want to lead with? It was actually really refreshing, but at first I held my breath and I kind of squeezed OT in there. And I was like, what about the relation between IT and OT and building that into our IT infrastructure? And without any hesitation, everybody on the call with a resounding yes agreed to it. And that was nice because I don't think that we were there 10 years ago for people to even understand it. So whether it's the conversation of people having more situational awareness for doing things like electrical utilities in the very beginning, or maybe other methods to provide power, the going back to having cyber built in the very beginning, there is an increased level of awareness. I guess the next question is, how exactly do we expedite that awareness, right? Like, what things do you see in the community, or what things do you believe that we can do as contributors or as a community in a whole to keep teaching and training? Because there are a lot more conferences. I think there is a lot more collateral. But in the perfect world, how would you see that being done?
It's a double-edged sword. Obviously, I'm focused a lot in the critical infrastructure space. Obviously, I do this podcast and, speak at things like you do as well, right? Usually when we're speaking at those types of things, we're not speaking to people that maybe don't already know it, or they're already aware of cyber. Maybe they're IT people, they're not OT people. One of the bigger struggles I see is in the government federal space, right? I've been to Capitol Hill. I've had those conversations with congressmen and senators and their staff. They're vastly under aware of what's going on in the space, or even what the real risk is and how difficult of a problem it is to solve, right? And that's something we've got to continue. Part of that, I'm sure, is you can't be an expert at everything, and believe me, I don't want to wear that hat, but I can't imagine being a representative that you have to know about financial and all of the different things that happen in our world, in our government, in our local and state and federal. And cybersecurity is such a very difficult and big problem. Like, how could you expect, an 80-year-old person or a 30-year-old person to be able to understand, all of those problems? So we have to be able to consolidate this down. I try to have these conversations where I could explain it to my mother, right? I could explain it to my grandmother in a way that obviously she's not going to get to the same level that you and I have with the experience, because that's what we do, but they should at least understand enough. Funny enough, my mother-in-law actually listens to my podcast. She doesn't do cybersecurity. She doesn't have anything to do with any of this stuff, but she finds it interesting, which to me is just hilarious, but it's awesome. Like, if you're listening to Shell, hello.
After every session, she's like, Aaron, love the call today. This is great.
But that it's funny, but that's what we have to do. We have to make this, it's really easy to say big words and prove how smart I am by drawing on the board and talking about zero trust and AI and all the things. But I have to be able to condense it down, as a salesman does. I have to be able to condense it down so that you understand it. Not only do you understand it, but you understand the risk and the need and the importance, and be able, so we can have a conversation around who do we need to get involved that can help us find a solution out the other end. Yes. And then all the politics things, that's beyond, I don't even want to talk about that, because that's the other thing. Securing the grid should not be left or right. It should be, we all use electricity. We all want to continue to use electricity and water and transportation and everything else. Let's just put those things aside.
Basic needs. Yeah, right. And even the education piece, you made a really good point too, of making it as foundational so that anybody could walk in the room. I like that analogy of explaining it to your mom or your stepmom, because I literally do this all the time with my family. So I think we probably share that experience. And a way where you explain it, not only does it get the gears going and you see the light bulb in their head, but then they're curious about it and they're comfortable enough to actually ask questions in the room. I think the most beneficial conferences or sessions or workshops that I've ever been to is when you walk in a room, you don't know what anybody there does. You don't know who they are. You don't even know what you're walking into. You just know you're about to have a discussion about something infrastructure related. And you go around the room and you make intros, and then they just bring a topic up. And you just sit there and you just talk back and forth. And those are almost the most valuable ones, because it's like you're locked in a room together. You got to figure it out. And every single time I've left a room like that, learning more, because I don't know everything and the space is changing so fast, building relationships, learning more and educating myself, and then also bringing any experience that I have to the table so people can learn from it. I almost wish there was more of that in an industry. Like, now I'm not saying that conferences, everything aren't important. They definitely are. But even a conference that 3 days is dedicated to just rotating round tables of discussion. Can you imagine that?
It'd be incredible, and I've got an intern that's working with me. I tell this to everyone, but even down to, not that an intern is less than me. I just mean they're very, just graduated college, hasn't worked in this industry or a lot of experience in this space. I always tell everyone, I don't care if you think I'm wrong or you want to ask a question, ask the question, challenge me. Like, we don't need yes men around us. We need people that will challenge you. When I had teams and, when I worked at Power Utility, I had the pretty decent sized team. And obviously there were people that reported directly to me or had little to no power utility experience. And so it can be intimidating to challenge someone like that, or the plant manager, or, the control system operator, or anything like that. And I'm like, look, I'd rather you ask I'm doing air quotes here for people just listening, stupid question, because it's not a stupid question. If it's coming up in your head, there's a reason. Trust your instinct. Ask the question. Yeah. And maybe they have a good answer for it, and that's fine. And then you move on. Like, I'm not telling you to start a fight with people, but at least ask the question so that they at least have to think through. It's kind of like the whiteboard analogy you used earlier. When you're drawing it out and you get to that place, you're like, okay, so how does this work? And people are like, well, you told me in the beginning you didn't have secure remote, or you didn't have remote access, but how are you getting to here without remote access? And then you're like, right. Oh, well, we have that, and there's a 3G card that connect in from the back, and that goes directly to the vendor. That's called remote access.
Yeah, and by the way, they're all shared credentials, and we don't have any logging by any means, and the modems,
and we don't monitor it.
Like, oh, yeah, we're getting some of this now. And also, it's like getting back down to the foundations. I think even anybody that's a SME in whatever you do in life, engineering, cybersecurity, teaching finance, whatever it is, even doing like instructional or teaching, I think it's very rewarding because the same way that, you and I and several others in the community go out and we try having that back and forth conversation like we're having now, you really do learn something and you reinforce your own learning. I mean, there's so much to learn that it's almost like even having reminders about those foundational things, it recalibrates you again. And it's humbling in a lot of ways.
Well, and for me, I was talking to my wife about it yesterday. My kids are their grandparents. So my wife and I, we were at a bookstore and we were just doing single parent things, right? We didn't have any kids around us, we've been married 17 years, have 3 kids. So we rarely get those. So we take advantage of them. So we were at the bookstore and I was just recalling my early career and I was in desktop support and I was like 19 years old, like my first real job. And I remember I didn't know very much at all. I mean, I was very technically capable. I'd taught myself how to use computers. I was pretty smart and capable, but I'd never worked a job. I didn't know any of this stuff. And they were doing a project, whatever company I was working for was doing a project. And they were like, hey, does anybody know how to do this? And nobody raised their hand. And then they were like, okay, well, we need this done. Who's willing to do it? And I raised my hand. I'm like, I'll do it. They're like, do you know how to do it? I'm like, nope, but I'll figure it out. So then I just went to a store and I literally I bought a book. And I think I bought like 10 books on this subject. And I didn't read them cover to cover, but I was looking for the things that would help me. And I use them almost as a reference. I did that back then and it really grew my career because I was always the person willing to raise my hand and I was willing to take on a challenge. I was willing to be wrong. I was willing to ask the stupid question. Yeah. And I was also willing to go home and read a book and study and then try to figure it out and play with it in the lab and all the things. But I've never stopped that. Like I constantly constantly trying out. It's why I've been diving into AI. I've been doing cybersecurity for so long, but I've been diving into AI because I see, not that I want to get out of cybersecurity, but that I see AI is going to be part of how we succeed and things we're going to have to defend against. Right. So we should be constantly learning and growing because it keeps our mind sharp, but also it's going to be, it goes back to what I said a minute ago. What got you here won't get you there. You can't just be the Palo Alto firewall guy because that's all you'll ever be. You're not going to be able to get a promotion. Like you're going to be limited. And I love Palo Altos and I love configure firewalls, but I don't want to be pigeonholed into only doing that for the rest of my career.
Yeah, and it makes me more multifaceted and several different dimensions what you're talking. And I love that, by the way. Being a lifelong learner is so important, not just in our industry, but across the board. I mean, I remember sitting down in some of these meetings and people be asking questions or I'd be a fly on the wall and they would say something. And I remember sitting there and being like, I don't know what that is. Like, I have no idea what that is. And I had to take a second. And so what I did is I bought this huge notebook and I would just start writing notes nonstop. And then every Saturday I would go to Barnes and Noble's, great people watching, by the way, have a couple of coffees and I would just study and I would write tons and tons of notes. And today, it was so funny because this is really relevant to me right now. I was going through all my files and there's File Explorer and my notes page popped up. It's still running. And I have over 200 pages in notes over the last couple of years that you just go. And it is important, man. So just completely keep educating yourself. And also when you learn things like your example where you raise your hand, you volunteer yourself. What's that expression? I'm a Navy guy, but it's smooth seas never made skillful sailors. Right. Throwing yourself in and learning how to navigate the ship and how to run a crew, even whenever it might seem incredibly difficult or you don't really know the path ahead, you figure it out. And then when you get to the other end and you dock, you can tell the other sailors about it. And now when they go out to sea, now they have experiences that they can lean on or they learn for themselves. So that analogy's on the fly, by the way. I never recorded that, doll. So it's all there, right? So that's exactly what it is. And on your conversation of AI, totally agree. And there's times where you're working and you're grinding and you're doing all these amazing things to the community, but it's also so important to carve time out for growth for things that may be related or tangential, but like they have some relation, like cybersecurity and AI, right? Or OT and AI. We're starting to see the convergence of both of these things coming together at a very accelerated rate. And so similar to you, right? I got really fascinated with this and I wanted to research it. And it comes down to a timing thing and making time. And I ended up, I don't know why I did this, but I just finished one of my school programs. I decided to go for an AI school program. And I remember looking at it and I was like, oh man, it's kind of pricey. I don't know if I should do this. And then I took a step back and I was like, you know what? Honestly, 8 hours every Saturday and learning AI, it's not just going to help me in this field, but it'll help me be more well-rounded and a general Swiss Army knife. So it's the future, like all around.
Well, and again, but it really gets to the mindset we need to have and how do we solve these problems, right? So we've talked a lot about in this episode, right, is what do we think and what can we do and what's the next steps and what's the future is coming faster every moment, right? It's changing, it's exponentially growing faster and the technology curve is just taking off and AI is going to do this even faster. So that just means it's going to be on us to do more and more, right? We're going to have to learn faster. We're going to have to shift and adapt because unfortunately in the cybersecurity space, the bad guys are going to be using it too, right? So if we're lazy and we say, oh, we're just going to keep doing it this way because this is what we've done for the past X number of years and it's been fine, that works until it doesn't. And that's going to cause the problem because we're not ready, right? And they're going to be using all of those things because it's easier for them to use this newer technology than it is they're not going to attack you where you're strong. They're going to attack you where you're weak. It's just obvious, right? So, Sun Tzu, Art of War, use your strengths as weaknesses and your weaknesses as strengths. It's going to be all of those types of things. So we have to be thinking about these things. We have to be, on the federal space, we have to be looking at bases and federal buildings and all these types of things, because those are, if there ever was an attack in the future and, a nation state were going to attack us, cyber is going to more than likely be part of that, of their response, right? So they're going to be coming after bases. They're going to be coming after buildings. They're going to be coming after our infrastructure. They're going to be coming after, buildings and streetlights and our electric grid. I mean, just you name it. Anything like that would cause panic. It would cause difficulty for movement around the cities and transportation and all of these things. It's just like a big domino that impacts and just slows us down and changes our focus where, a bad actor can attack or they can, steal something or whatever they're trying to do. And all of these things are linked together.
Yeah. I don't know if people ever really think about the daisy chain effect of all of these things, right? Like a primary attack on electric utility or power. What are secondary and third hand effects of that? Or even jamming comms with no RF, how much that impacts everything across the board. We see it in geopolitical issues today too, right? And it's really the first step to decapacitate everything that's going on, incapacitate everything that's happening around the city, county, state, and nation. And then once you lose some of those infrastructure pieces, it all just starts falling down, to your point. And another part of AI too, right? Like if we're not using AI, I guarantee you that nation states and adversaries are. I mean, even looking at things like programming today, right? You can go write hundreds of lines of code and pure application that would take me hours back in the day. And now you just put your prompt in, you do a little bit of prompt engineering, tailor it as you want. The same capacity that we're making those applications and we're doing things to make our life a bit more easier with automation, which I'm on board with. On the other end of the spectrum, they're also doing things like looking at how to exploit payloads and create those different payloads and how you're hacking different registers. And it's pretty crazy that instead of the 100 lines of codes that took me a couple of hours, it's the same thing for them. So instead of a couple of hours on their front, it might take them 15, 30 minutes, an hour. I mean, I'm not talking about very sophisticated and complex 0 days, but maybe we will get there in the very near future.
Well, and we're already seeing it. Again, I talked about this in a previous episode where, it's almost a race now. So when a vulnerability comes out, when XYZ vendor releases, hey, we've got this vulnerability and we even have a patch for it. The problem with that is that the bad actors know that there's a vulnerability and you're vulnerable until you patch it, right? And especially in OT, we don't patch as frequently. Now, granted, we have mitigating controls and we're not in theory on the network or internet and blah, 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 blah. But that doesn't mean that we're not at risk. So that's the problem is it's almost like as soon as they release the patch or release the notice that there's a vulnerability, now the bad people, the bad actors know that. And now they can, narrow it down and say, I'm only going to attack these things. And I know the path in. They're giving you the answers to the test. And then all you have to do is use AI or adjust an attack that you already have that would fit that or fix that. So they don't have to figure out the whole world. They don't have to find all of the solutions. They just have to find the one. And they know that you have this PLC or this controller or this firewall or this whatever that has the vulnerability, and I'm just going to attack that. And then I'm in the door. And then I can do something. Maybe I drop a payload. Maybe I do whatever I want to do. That's the problem that we're facing is it's just, to your point, it's going to be faster for them to make something that can take advantage of those vulnerabilities. They don't even have to find the vulnerabilities themselves. They just wait till somebody announces it, right? So what's the way around that?
Yeah. And by the way, they're not only they're tell you the vulnerability, but they're going to tell you the remediation that every single asset owner is going to use. It is unique too, right? Because then the asset owner, again, my heart goes out to anyone that's ever been impacted in a situation like that. But you have to scramble for a successful incident response. if you even plan for the incident response. And when the response happens, do you have a playbook that has a primary and secondary owner? Who knows? Is all the data up to date? Who knows? And then, you might have how many tools now you're using across IT and OT. It's not one pane of glass. You're having to run around. How is your alerting system working? Like, are you running to a product that's a SIM in its own capacity? Is it a bunch of white noise that's doing automated flows? Is your organization okay with automated flows? Because people get a bit scared of that idea, which I can totally understand. But even on the AI front of what you mentioned earlier, which I'm thinking about now, is, fighting AI with AI. And I think it's also a fair call out to say, when we say fighting AI, that doesn't mean you have to give it the keys to your entire castle. You can do it in a layered way to where maybe it's just on the front line outside the door. And then it is now a supplement or an augmentation to your security program, but not necessarily the kernel of it. So it's a really good call out on.
But that goes back to, everything comes back around to, if I design my system and I use cyber-informed engineering and I design that system, I figure out, I can design in where I can plug that AI or that capability in. I don't want to give it control over my system. I'm not going to just tie in AI or have it turn things on and off in my lower Purdue, the lower levels of the Purdue model. But at those higher levels where it's outside and it's not directly controlling, I can have it do things, right? Because worst case scenario, I can't get to it remotely, but I'm in the room, right? And that's okay, because I want to be able to control those things. So that's where we need to start thinking outside the box. 10 years ago, we never would have had that conversation. Like, they would never allow any automatic responses or automatically turn things on or off, and that's from a human, much less have an AI do something like that. But we've got to at least start challenging the status quo and start pushing beyond just we would never do that, right? It's got to be more of okay, how could we do this? What could we do? Where's the limit? Where's the boundary? And how could we do it safely? What areas could we put it in where it could help, right? And start having those questions instead of just saying no. Start saying, how could we? Like, obviously, I know I'm not going to plug it into my control system. Gotcha. I agree with you.
Right.
That's off the table. But where could we put it? Could we put it above the firewall where it's just looking at things coming in from outside?
Yeah.
Maybe you're okay with that.
Yeah. Maybe there's a data diode. Maybe the AI is running on local compute and it's not even SaaS hybrid based. And maybe that compute is or the AI engine itself is just informing the decisions to a policy that you already have built into your NAC itself. So I totally agree. And I personally believe it's repeating itself. I mean, if you look how the industry's been even over the last 30 or 20 years, thinking about things like digital transformation. For anyone that's just listening, those are the air quotes I threw out. Digital transformation, incorporating things like passive analysis and spans and taps and smart active querying and integration in those ways. And as we see over time, people have started understanding a safe way to deploy these different mechanisms to make them more secure. And AI is just another thing, and it's the next phase, and it's coming fast. And it can be contained. We just have to figure out a safe way to do it, right? So to your point, I think maybe some people hear the idea of AI and any sort of industrial control system or vertical of infrastructure, and immediately they say, oh, I'm good. No, thank you. Have a nice day, but it's peeling the layers back for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the same thing goes back to, how many years have we been saying you can't be active in OT, right? You can't scan in OT. Scan is a bad word in OT. The funny thing is I was using, NAC. You mentioned NAC. I was using a NAC in OT before there were any passive monitoring OT tools available back in 2010. None of these products existed. Like Dragos didn't exist when I started doing this stuff, right? It wasn't a product that you could buy. So I took Cisco and, Splunk and other products and put it into OT spaces, was doing full packet capture on networks. We're using a NAC and we were scanning networks, but I would configure it. Okay, don't scan this subnet. Don't scan this. Right. I'm not doing a full protocol scan. I'm just interacting. I'm logging in SNMP on switches to get their capabilities. I'm doing all that. You can do it. You just can't do it. You can't do a full Nmap scan on your network every 2 hours like you might do in an IT space, because absolutely it'll cause problems. But because of those problems, that's what's gotten this bad stigma. And a lot of the vendors have really pushed we're passive and that's the only way. And people have bought in. And passive is great. I love passive. And I think it's a need, and everybody should have passive monitoring. And also we need to do more. And also we need to look at AI. And also we need security. It's an entire ecosystem of things that we need, because look at NIST, NIST CSF or NIST 853 or 62443.
Mhm.
There's more than one control. It's not like you just put in a firewall and I'm done. Like, it's not, I put endpoint protection, so I'm good. I don't need any more cyber. That's all the cyber I needed. Thank you.
Right. There's layers, man.
Yeah.
100%. And even going back to like the passive and the active conversation, you always hear the story about somebody that is a very aggressive active pole and knocks the whole plant down. The world ends. I mean, that could, right? Like, I get it. And you can have aggressive scan if you're going out there and you're doing it in a irresponsible way, or maybe a very aggressive way where it's not contained. Absolutely. Right. But as all things, any tool that you use or any way you're configuring a network, if you can configure something the wrong way, think about like a broadcast storm. That could take a network down too if you're not configuring it correctly. So providing the capability to do things like deep packet inspection and the active capability, if that organization wants to do it and the mechanism is done in a very safe, low and slow way, talking unique protocols with bit rates that mimic those of a control system. Cool. Not like bazookaing an Active Directory all over the place, right? And the other thing too that you mentioned that I actually really appreciate is when you did build that NAC out in 2010, when you had a NAC and you had Splunk and you used different tools together, the power of collaboration between tools, not in a way to where it overburdens an organization, operator, or customer, but in a way where it actually enhances it. I think once you pass that line where you have so many tools, you got to blow the dust off of something. It might be time to consolidate a bit down.
Well, and to your point, and this gets into the people side of things, I can't be an expert in everything, right? I'm a smart guy. I've had my hands in a lot of things. I've done firewalls, I've done NACs, I've done, spanning. I've done a lot of things in my career, and I'm pretty good at all of them. But you don't want me being the guy that's doing all of the things, right? I'm really good at seeing the big picture. I understand zero trust and cloud and all the things, but you want me helping just drive the direction. You don't want me hands on keyboard designing the firewall policy. Even though I've done that in my past and I could dust off that section of my brain and make it work in a pinch. But there's a lot better people than me that can do it now and would do it a lot more effectively and a lot faster and all the things, right? So when you get into OT, I find that so few organizations have, again, going back to what I had, I can't speak for everybody, but everybody I've seen has been this way. They have a very, very small OT team of one, maybe, I had 6 people that worked directly for me, and we supported 45 power plants across the state of Texas, right? And that was a nuclear power plant and, mines and all these different places. And we supported all the technology from the OT firewall down. And the IT side had a dedicated firewall team and a dedicated VM team and a dedicated application team and a dedicated network and Cisco team and a dedicated.
But the OT team, 6.
They had 10x the budget of us and again, I'm not saying that they shouldn't have had the budget they had. I just mean that my team had to be multi-skilled. They had to be able to support VMware and Cisco switches and routers and firewalls, WhatsUp Gold and Splunk and a NAC and, patching and everything in between. And obviously they can't be experts in any of those things, but they had to be good enough that they could figure it out and then open tickets and work with sponsors and vendors. But this goes back to having that partnership. In a perfect world, my team would be hands-on, but if they had a firewall issue, they'd work with the IT firewall team because they do this on a daily basis and they have the deeper skill set. We would bring one of those IT people into my OT space and my team would just monitor and advise them on, hey, this is what I want to do. I need you to implement it. This is the criteria and do it this way. Make sure that we all agree and then have them help us implement, right? So that'd be a perfect world, but I've seen almost no one actually execute that way. Unfortunately.
I was about to say, with the WAD, amazing, right? But to your point, it's always, then you have to sit down and it comes back to, well, I don't own that, or maybe that's not my scope of responsibility. And then you take a step back and you're like, we're 6 people. How do we get this done among all of us and load balance bandwidth here? So I don't know. I mean, that's another good conversation of resourcing wise, how to support that in OT. And the tools not only are for security and automation, but doing it in a way where it makes their lives easier, the end user easier. And, I think we're starting to get to a point with things like software-defined networking and how you're doing route and switching management, APs management. But even things like people becoming more and more okay with automation to alleviate that burden. But I mean, 6 people across all those sites, that's a constant.
All us, right. It was working every outage. Yeah. I mean, I had 3 guys that started, they went through training, onboarding training, and then they never went to their office. They just started going to outages at power plants for the next 6 months.
They're like, this is the training, actually. You have to do 6 outages the first week. And they're like,
so for the next 6 months, they were at power plants all over the state doing control system upgrade project and outages, working, 7 days a week, 16-hour days sometimes. And it was a grind, but it was what was required to get it done. And at the end of the day, they had, to your point, it was the best training they could have gotten, right? After 6 months, they were experts. They'd been in 6 control system upgrades. They've been in outages. They've seen the problems. They built the systems. Who better to support it than the guys that built it, right? And after that point, they're the rock stars. And to this day, they're still working in the space and crushing it in OT. And they didn't have any OT experience before that. They didn't even heard of the term. They'd never been to a power plant before.
Yeah. They were essentially just thrown on the ship. And within a limited amount of time, now they're up to captains. Yeah. Even going back to, maybe by the time they were, they got on the ship at 18, they were captains by 20.
Exactly. By the time they hit land on the other side, they were sailors.
That was it. Yeah. They could be on a yacht. I don't know, man. But even compared to what you were saying earlier, where you said, you can do everything and you had experience with all these different things, these different facets, right? But going back to the ship analogy, yeah, you can steer the ship and you have so much experience, and anyone that's touched all these different things, but you still have things like who's manning the sails, who's using the cannons, who's doing things like bilging the water. It really is all a movement forward. And I'm just trying to think about the story you just shared, and I appreciate you sharing that with me about your team. I mean, that's something to be so proud of. And I think that's why we all love what we do in this community, is we're all willing to help each other. We've all been in these moments where you're just like, what is happening? And you just have to figure it out. And then 3, it's almost like we are giving back in some capacity, whether you're a vendor or you work at a firm or you're an asset owner. One way or another, you have some impact and touch and motivation on the mission. And that's something to say that you can be proud of when you tell people. So it's an awesome feeling.
Well, and it's part of that. It's one of the things I love about the cyber community in general. Obviously, the OT community is even smaller, but it is that I really see it as a community. Most of the folks in here, you have your outsiders or whatever, people that are in it for a different reason. But most of the time, I find that most people are open. Like, you could call me or I could call you and you would help. You would answer my call. You would answer a question, without any expectation of something in return, right? Even if we were competitors, like, it's just, that doesn't matter. Like, we really see this as the greater good. Now, obviously, I'm not going to give you, things that I can't share, but as long as it's within reason, and I find that across our industry, which is great. It's one of the things I love about what we do and going to conferences and doing that stuff, because the community is really strong.
Yeah, and in some capacity, I'd say most of us, if we don't know each other directly, it's just one hop away. We all know each other in one way or another. I mean, it's almost like, I remember, I was going to say a couple of weeks, must be a couple of months now. I'm sharing the story for the viewers, but I went to a conference it was a construction management conference of firms and engineering firms. And I went and I saw the ICS Village wall there. And I remember talking, and I was yapping and very loud, energetic, like I always am. And then all of a sudden, I see Aaron's head pop out with this big beard, all excited, runs up, jumps, gives me a bear hug. And what's really interesting is Aaron and I had seen each other a couple of conferences before, but hadn't had the chance to really sit down for an extended amount of time. But wherever we went, it was always that sort of love and support. And all in all, I think just like an overall respect and camaraderie of, hey, we're in this together. We all work in this to a common mission, and it's something you can really appreciate. So it's a good example right there.
We've talked about a lot of fun and exciting, and maybe even a few scary things, and I'll wrap it up. And I think we probably have talked about this before, but I'm going to ask it because I always ask this question to everybody. In the next 5 to 10 years, what's one thing you see come up over the horizon that may be scary, that's concerning? Or other side is, what's one thing that's exciting that you see that's going to potentially impact our environment, our network, our security, our people, our process, whatever that may be?
Yeah, sure. I would say the scary piece of it to start off with, because I always like ending on a really positive note, is we're seeing it every day right now for geopolitical issues. And it's so unfortunate. My heart goes out to all the people that have been impacted on every capacity of infrastructure being attacked. And it's becoming more and more prevalent. And it's just something that, imagine waking up without power, or imagine waking up without any comms, or God forbid, kinetic warfare that has secondhand effects. And I'm terrified about that. You mentioned a little bit of it earlier, but I generally believe majority of wars going forward, and not to mention the ones already, unfortunately, that are happening today, are going to have some sort of touch on critical infrastructure. So that scares the bejeebers out of me, just being straight up. And then maybe switching over to a positive note, is we talked a bit about this too in the very beginning, is from a regulatory standpoint of, yes, the teeth hurt. And as long as we can have a fine balance between what that looks like, I'm actually really hopeful, positive about the way that our industry is going, not only to protect the actual infrastructure itself, but to all the end consumers and constituents of state and local governments and our militaries and everything else. And I think in 5 years, it's only going to expedite even further. And sure, there might be some growing pains, but where we're at today and where our posture's at today, it might need it might be a necessary pain in order to have a successful longevity of how we defend our infrastructure in a multiple ways.
100%, man. 100%. So how can people find more about you? Where are you going to be? Find more about Armis? Like, this is the call to action for folks that they've gotten to this part. Give them all the juicy details.
Boy, I tell you what. Okay, well, first off, thanks for sticking with us this whole time. I want to start by saying, Aaron, really appreciate you having me. I know we tried this 15 times or whatever it might be, 8 times, and the number was 7 or 8. But just to reiterate, I'm Kam Chumley-Soltani. You can find me on LinkedIn, whether Armis related or not. Again, this is a community thing. You can reach out to me anytime, and I will make time to talk to anybody. And if you send a message to me and I don't respond, message me again. And I love the reminder and keep me honest because I'm here to help. And in Armis capacity, hey, I'll tell you what, we're moving fast and for a good reason, and we're busy for a good reason. And our mission really is that, to go through and protect critical infrastructure, IT, OT, medical IoT. The product is absolutely insane. I mean, we have over 260 integrations, a lot of them that are bidirectional. We have pass discovery. We have smart active querying. We can deploy wherever an organization is at, flyaway kit, SaaS, hybrid, on-prem, you name it. But I think most of all, what I'm most proud of is the fact that we are dedicated to the community. So not just showing up and selling a product and walking away, but providing a solution in an advisory capacity where they can reach out. And it's actually pretty cool for someone to message you on LinkedIn just randomly, like, hey, talked the other day, really like what you're talking about. Can I just pick your brain about something? That's the relationship that we provide. So that's the plug, not only for me as an individual, but where I'm at working, and very proud in a capacity at Armis. I'm here and we're here to support wherever that looks like. And I just really appreciate it.
Man, I appreciate it. And that's the key to success. And whether it's industry or obviously our personal brand is having that openness and doing it for more than just a sell or a transaction, exactly. Whether it's an individual transaction or whatever. And giving, the funny thing is when you give, you usually receive more than you give in the first place. And whether that's in a business or in a personal relationship, I see that being super impactful, right? So same thing with me, right? I'm always an open door. I'm very busy. That doesn't mean that if I don't respond to you, it's not because I'm ignoring you. It may have gone to spam or it just got lost in my list. So hit me up again, like follow up, don't take it personally, just reach out and just go for that for anyone. Like I said, this community is very, very good about that. Rob Lee is known, Rob Lee, the CEO of Dragos, is known for directly responding to people that reach out to him on social media, things like that. It's really cool to see. No matter if you're the CEO of a company or, you're an entry-level analyst and everything in between, just reach out, ask for help. How can I get things? How can I, I'm having this problem, or I want to get this job, or I want to get into OT or whatever that may be. We're all willing to have it. We've all been in that seat. I started out somewhere. You did too, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it really is, again, having the captain of the ship to help steer you along the way. And you mentioned one already, like Rob Lee leading the way, Nadir Israel leading the way, some really great people, Dale Peterson. I mean, there's so many people in the community, down from executives all the way down to the operators themselves. And we're here to help. I mean, I think when you say this, people always kind of cringe a bit, but it really is a family, or a better word for it. Yeah, it's a community. We're all driving forward.
Well, hey, bud, I appreciate your time. Thanks for taking it. And since we both live in Austin, we definitely got to get together. I know we've talked about it. We've got to actually schedule time and do that. So let's make that happen the next, it's not too long, distant future.
Yeah, you got it. My pleasure, man. Stakes in the road matter for sure.
Awesome, brother. We'll definitely reach out to Cam and take him up on that offer, y'all. Have a good one. Appreciate y'all's time.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Thanks for joining us on Protect It All, where we explore the crossroads of IT and OT cybersecurity. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to stay ahead in this ever-evolving field. Until next time.